Last time and this time, we talked a little bit about deploying your applications. By deploying applications, I mean, how do you get the results of your work into the hands of your users? And we talked about sort of the most basic one, the oldest one, which was creating a jar file. Then you can write an installation routine, or you can, there's packages that create installation routines for you, whatever, to copy the jar over and so on. Really, if we're going to split it, there's two ways that this can work. And again, it's not like you can take code from one and just magically make it work the other way. The applications have to be designed with this in mind. But you have your Java code. One way that it can be deployed is it can be distributed to a bunch of other computers. They have to, of course, have installed a Java virtual machine. The advantage of this is you don't have to be connected to the internet to do this, right? The disadvantage is if you make a change in your Java code, guess what? It needs deployed on all those machines. Again, keep in mind, this is not like the same piece of Java code. This is just Java code in general. You can also use Java code to create so this is with the jar. You can also use Java code to create an Android app, which then gets installed on different devices. And you have the same update problem, except mobile platforms have a way of like automatically updating or giving you an easy way to update your code. So that's, that's a bonus for that. On all these, the Java code lives with the user. All right. So the Java code is spread on these computers. The Java code is put on these mobile devices through Android. The other way to do that, and again, these would have to have built within them a Java virtual machine because they execute Java. But typically that's part of the Android system, so it's not like you have to install anything. The other place that it can live, Java code, is it can live on a server. And there used to be a couple different ways you can do that. Now, there's basically a couple ways that you can do this. Or there used to be several ways that you can do it. Now there's essentially one or two, depending on how you count it. Java code then will be deployed on a server. That server needs a Java virtual machine. And all the users are connected to that server via the internet. And they make requests through the internet and get responses back from the server. But the Java code only lives on the server. So correcting a bug, what do you have to do? Just fix it in one place. Who has to have the Java virtual machine? Only the server. All these different users that are connected, they don't need anything special. They don't need a Java virtual machine. They just need a web browser. And, everything has a web browser, right? Game consoles do, phones do. Computers certainly do. The problem with this is for the users to connect to this, they have to be connected to the internet. But we talked about this one. We're going to spend maybe a couple minutes reviewing and talking about that one. Then we're going to talk about creating Android applications, and then we're going to talk about web applications, which use some combination of JSP and servlets. We should be able to get that in today. By the way, this is the last lecture for this class. Next week is sort of a catch-up week for everyone, and I will be having extended office hours. I'll post all this information coming up within the next, few days, this week certainly. All right. So let's look. I have my first GUI here. And again, this is stored in a folder that NetBeans will recognize as being a NetBeans application. Keep in mind that when we do this compilation, what we deliver to the user is the bytecode. We don't have to deliver our source code that we've written in Java. That's why if you notice, it'll say the source and the target. The source is the Java code that we have written. The target is what we will use to deploy. And I can open this up. Notice the icon is a little different in this window for that. And my stored packages, I have my first GUI in this package, and I can run it. Gives me an error. Cannot find or load main class. This is again is a problem that it has sometimes if you import an application. Go and right mouse and select properties, and under run, that was set wrong. Now we should be all set. And sure enough, here we are. We can type it in and we can calculate centigrade to Fahrenheit or Fahrenheit to centigrade. Now, if we look at this, source is where our code was. This folder structure. So there's our Java source. Our bytecode gets put in the object or this. And the main things that we're interested in is these are the compiled classes. The main thing we're interested in is the jar. And I'm just going to rename that to first GUI. Gives me a nice little version number and all that. We're not going to worry about. I'm going to go copy this to the desktop. And now I can run it. And there we go. Now, I mentioned about having a manifest in this. Manifest is found under these project files underneath this POM file. And if we look at it, this configuration is a code that configures the app. And if you look at it, I had posted to Canvas how to create that manifest if it doesn't exist. So if it doesn't exist, this shows you what you need to do it. And here's an example that does have it. Now, the other thing that I talked about last time is Java docs, which you can create under, was it? Under run, yeah. It will go and it will create standard Java documentation. Target site API docs. That might be in a hidden file, hidden folder. Maybe that's why we can't see it. But here we go. Here's our class. All that. We go out there and look again. There we go. You know what? I was looking at this. I was looking at the zip file. And the docs is not in that, obviously. It's in the version that I expanded. So we can click that and we can see our class. There's a way to put annotations in the file. Let me Google that real quick. How to write comments for the Java doc. And they show you an example. It's formatted this way. It'll say, it'll contain these comments inside the Java doc. So if you have these comments in your code, the HTML will look like this. It'll be more descriptive. You could put some comments in your code to add more information to your Java docs. Okay, that's that. The next thing I want to look at is Android. Review in the intro to Android. Oh, that's not running this semester. That was running last semester. This runs in the fall. Let's go in. I hope there's Android Studio installed. There is. We're not going to do anything too fancy. I'm just going to make a new project. And keep it simple. I'll make one. Make an empty activity. Different formats of these, similar to what you get like in Visual Studio. So I can pick this, We set some parameters, the name of the application, where is it going to be stored, and the language. When Android first came out, all Android programming was done in Java. Since then, there's been a split. There's Java and there's a new language called Kotlin. So Kotlin is gaining in popularity. So it's possible at some point Java won't be used to a great degree, but it is currently used now, and there's a lot of legacy applications written in Java that need maintained. We can pick the kind of Android we want, and according to this, your app will run on approximately 99.3 of the devices. If I went back to an earlier version, it will run on approximately 100% of the devices. Let's click Finish. Downloads a bunch of stuff. Using an IDE is critical for this because for just a simple project, look at all the files it got and all the things that got created. Okay, so here's our project. It's loading that. And say, what's taking it? There we go. It's a bunch of folders, a bunch of control files. Gradle handles the compilation of it, and there's properties associated with that. Plus, there's dependencies. You depend on having the basic Android framework installed and so on. In this case, we'll notice that the Java code is actually very, very, very thin. Look in here, we have just one class, activity, and there's not a lot to it because we picked an empty application. But again, you see it has an onCreate method that's part of the Android framework for this type of activity, which is an app compatible activity. And the code that we have here is just Java. All right. The nice thing about this is that we don't have to worry too much about the GUI in that because the GUI is handled in a different way. The GUI is handled through layout files. So I'm going to create another new app. Basic activity. Cancel. All right, this does a lot more. And this you can see. In this, there's a set of resource files. And those resource files include a layout. So for each activity, an activity is more or less a screen that they show at a time. A fragment is part of that screen. You might have the same fragment appearing on multiple screens. All right. But we have a nice XML. Get to it. We have an XML file. We haven't done XML before. It's similar to HTML, but it has different tags in it. It has tags that are appropriate for whatever task it is set out to be. If I run this now, which I should be able to, it's going to bring up a little Android device and an emulator. Start the emulator. Our little pretend phone. Takes a little while to start up this virtual device. Canceled out of that other one. Oh. And there we're installing, and there's our app, which I don't know if you can see it. You can break this out and make it bigger. And it says hello first fragment. So the layout, there's a layout for the main activity, and then there's a first fragment. It contains stuff. In our case, it just contains a little message that says stuff, and it says hello first fragment, or yeah, Android text hello first fragment. Things are very modularized and separated into components with this. You're not going to have code to create the GUI. You're going to have code that accesses the GUI. Your building of the GUI is in creating of these layout files, these resource files. There's other cool things too. There's values. So you put all your hard-coded strings in a file and give them a name. And in that way, if you want to change something about it, you just change the name in this file. Like if I want to change the application name, I can change the application name. First fragment, label is first fragment. If I want to change that, I'll change it to first fragment, like that. Then if I run this again, it comes up, let's change the first fragment. That's nice because if you have phrases, words and phrases that are used consistently throughout your application, you can put them in one place. And if you decide to change them, there's just one place to change them. This also has an advantage of making your code have the possibility of being, what do I want to say, language sensitive, location sensitive. So you can actually create the resource file for strings. The default is called strings. If you wanted to create a strings French file, you would create a file called strings-fr. And then if you change the setting of the strings file, if you change the settings of the device, let's create a new strings file. Oh, create a new. I could give the name strings, and I can have it for mobile country code, which that's the network code. Locale. Country code is a number. One more time. One issue with this is this changes really frequently. There we go. That's what I was looking for, locale, not country code. We can set it to French, for example. I know a little bit of high school French. Any region where they speak French. There we go. Not sure why it's not allowing me to. Okay. Got to fill in the file name, I believe. Oh, thank you. I swear I thought I did that. Now it's going to do that. And it created it for French, and I can go and change some of the strings. Be different for French. So I keep the same name for the field, but I'm going to change the wording. Instead of first, I'm going to say premier. I believe it's first in French. So I can go pull up the settings of this device. Open up the settings, go to system, language, and I can add a language. I'll make French the first. Oh, Hope I'm not missing something here. And if we run this again, the application with Premier fragment up there. So it's really easy to internationalize your code because of all these files. You can also do things like based on the size of the device. So if you want one resource layout for a tablet and one for a phone, based on the size of the device, you can create a different layout file. Maybe on the layout you have more, on the tablet you have more stuff, and on the phone you have less stuff. All right, this isn't the intro to the Android class. This is hopefully encouraging you to take the Android class because it is a cool class. All right, now on to, let's close all these. Now on to this side of the picture. Some of you may have studied ASP or PHP or other server-side languages, or maybe you're doing it this term, all right? These languages run on the server and can interact with databases or whatever and produce HTML for the client. Well, there's a Java version of that server-side coding, and that is JSP pages or Java servlet pages. I don't know if we're configured to run these, but we can at least take a look at the code. Let's look at the first example. Close this guy. Look at example first. Hope everything works with this because I just connected it to the Glassfish server. Okay, we have a very simple page where I could type in my name, my password, and my age. Click submit. It goes to a server-side script and it tells me what the fields I entered in. Now, we certainly could do more than this, and we would do more than this in an application, right? But I could take those fields and do something with it. I could save it to a database, like registering a new person for a site or something like that. So the first page was just strictly an HTML document. Pages that we have here are user details. And in user details, we have what is called a Java bean. What is a Java bean? A Java bean is a class that fits certain criteria. It has to have a constructor with no arguments in it. All its attributes need set and get methods. Unless they're read-only, then they only need get methods. But what I can do is I can embed these beans using a command like this. Zoom that a little bit. Whoa. All right, here we're saying we're using a Java bean. This is all we have to do to use a Java bean. What is the name of the bean? It's in this class called edu uAkron Java 2 details. What do we call that? User info. This is the equivalent of saying details user info equals new details. We can set properties in the bean by this way. We can get output. This takes the value of the form and puts it as properties into user info. This goes and pulls the properties out of it and displays them on the screen. Oh, there we go. Had me worried for a second there. Now let's look at the bean. The bean should look familiar to you. The class that we've defined has a no argument constructor, its attributes are private, and has get and set methods for all of the attributes. You know, there's a reason why I had you create the classes or reviewed creating the classes the way I did. And that is so that you could use them. Most of the classes, if you follow the guidelines, you could use as a Java bean and incorporate into a web page this way. Now, in this JSP page, we could also call other Java code. If we created an object, we could call methods on it and so on. The other thing that we have is something called a Java servlet. JSP pages are HTML pages with Java code embedded in them. Servlets are the opposite. They're Java classes with HTML embedded in them. Let's go and open the servlet example and take a look at that. We go and run this. Let's see what we get. We have a form that we enter some data in. I wonder what this does. Date 10. This takes centigrade and converts it to Fahrenheit. My absolute. So I could take in 0 centigrade is. I have my HTML page, right, for the form where you enter the data. And that form submits to, look at the code for this HTML page. That form submits to example servlet. What is example servlet? It is a class in my source packages called example servlet. There's a second Java class, convert, that actually does the math. The Java servlet imports all this stuff, takes a request and a response, pulls the data from the query string, converts it to numeric data, creates a convert object, calls the convert object to get the results in Fahrenheit, and then outputs the HTML code that includes some Java here. You can do something very similar in ASP pages. It's just that in this case, we're using a servlet where the Java code contains outputted HTML code. All right, look over the next couple days for announcements concerning the end of the semester. I am usually very lenient as far as late work goes. However, I need to draw the line somewhere, and I'll put the date on which I am drawing the line, sort of the final deadline where everything has to be turned in by then. All right, that's all I had. Remember, no lecture next week. We'll be having extended office hours again, and we will talk to you later.